So we have a fairly new policy. We passed it last winter. There was interest from our parents and our board and administration to really kind of revise our personal electronic device policy and make it more of a bell-to-bell prohibition. So to do that, we've actually experimented with several ways. We were pretty budget constrained. We looked at the Yondr pouches and some of the a little bit higher startup cost alternatives, but decided in the school this size we will be able to manage without that.
I really appreciate our policy because it doesn't focus on controlling student behavior. Instead, it focuses on the idea that students are entitled to be in a community of learners and that cell phones disrupt that opportunity, and that we as educators have an obligation to create space where students can really focus on learning. And because of that, we have a bell-to-bell policy that does not give students access to their cell phones or any personal electronic devices.
A little bit about upfront costs. I think, if I remember correctly, the boxes were like 2 for $50. You could go smaller with these. Probably the most significant cost was the keying the locks on the having all the locks that are on the same key system. So that was probably the most costly part of it.
So we use Yondr Pouch, which I do find to be very helpful, and people can look online or talk to Yondr about the costs of purchasing the pouches and the magnets. We funded it through a grant, and I know there are grants available to schools for different cell phone policies, so I encourage schools to look for what those grants are. And then as far as the cost for implementation in the school day, we have not had to hire any extra staff. We have our guidance counselors greeting our kids in the morning when they pouch their phones. So cost-wise, it's been, I would say, pretty minimal.
Upfront work, the communication about this plan was really important. So we let students and families know that this change was coming, and this system, we anticipated what some of the frequently asked questions would be, and we wrote out a fact sheet so that people could get those answers. As more questions came in, we updated that sheet for folks, and there were a couple of rounds of communication. The other part that was really important is that at the beginning of the year, all of our students meet with their advisor, and their caregivers are part of that meeting. And with the caregivers in the room, they basically complete a form about what their phone plan is for the year. So it's part of a discussion that's happening with that person, the advisor, the student, and those caregivers.
Okay, so in terms of time, I think we spent about 20 hours on developing and sharing out the practices related to the policy. So the school committee developed the policy. My job was to figure out, okay, how are we going to actually implement this policy? So I did a lot of that work over the summer before we implemented the policy, so summer of 2024. And that was work I did with myself, the dean of students, who's the person on the ground, and the superintendent. And then when we started school, on our in-service days with teachers, we took probably about an hour and a half with teachers to really talk through the policy, to make sure that they understood it, that they felt supported, that they knew what their role was. And then we also spent probably about 20 minutes with each class, so 7 through 12 separately, talking through the expectations around the phones. In year one, those meetings were longer. Kids had a lot of questions about what is this going to look like, a lot of feelings about, if you're going to take my phone away. And in year two, it was pretty, it required about as much space and time as cafeteria behavior expectations. Kids just expected it to be part of the conversation. They didn't have many questions. They didn't have much feedback for us, which was great.